The rain hammered down on the corrugated iron roof of the warehouse, a relentless percussion that amplified Elias's already frayed nerves. Outside, the world was a canvas of bleak gray, the sky weeping down upon the Knox country. He shivered, pulling his threadbare jacket tighter. It wasn't just the damp chill, it was the constant, low-level hum of dread that had become a permanent fixture in his mind since this thing started. He had been a seasoned Project Zomboid player. He knew the routines, the safest routes, the best loot caches. He had laughed at the hordes, outsmarted the shambling masses. Until he had decided to experiment. A few innocent mods, just to spice things up. Horror mod pack, the description had read. Spiced it up, alright. It had turned his virtual apocalypse into a living nightmare. These weren't the slow, predictable zombies he was used to. These things were different. Faster. Quieter. And they could break through walls. He had woken up one morning in his fortified safe house, only to be greeted by the sight of one of them clawing its way through the meticulously barricaded front door. He had barely escaped with his life, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The worst part was the randomness. They didn't just shuffle along predefined paths. They appeared. Popped into existence, seemingly out of thin air. One moment, an empty hallway. The next, a snarling figure lurching towards him. The mod also included a rare infection mechanic. A bite didn't automatically mean death. Instead, it unleashed a psychological torment. He had heard stories, whispers on the zomboid forums of vivid, horrifying hallucinations, nightmarish visions that blurred the line between reality and imagined horrors. He desperately hoped he wouldn't be on the receiving end of that mechanic. Elias sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. He had been holed up in this warehouse for 3 days now, scavenging what he could and reinforcing the weak spots. He had boarded up the windows with scavenged planks, reinforced the loading bay doors with metal sheets he had pried off a wrecked car, and set up a makeshift alarm system using tin cans and fishing line. It was a fragile defense, but it was all he had. He needed to find a more permanent base, a place he could truly call home. Somewhere secure. Somewhere safe. But in this twisted version of Knox country, safety was a luxury he couldn't afford. He switched on the handheld radio, the static crackling in the air. He had been trying to pick up any signs of other survivors, any glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. All he got was static and the occasional garbled broadcast about military evacuations that clearly never happened. Suddenly, a faint voice cut through the static. Hello? Anyone? Can anyone hear me? Elias's heart leapt. This is Elias. I hear you. Where are you? The voice was weak, almost a whisper. West Point. Trapped. Corner store. Infected. Before Elias could respond, the signal cut out. Silence again, broken only by the relentless rain. West Point was a dangerous place, swarming with the undead even in the vanilla game. But the thought of another survivor, someone who needed help, gnawed at him. He couldn't just ignore it. He spent the next few hours meticulously preparing. He checked his weapons, a crowbar, a hunting knife, and a rusty pipe he had found leaning against a dumpster. He packed a backpack with essential supplies, canned food, water bottles, bandages, and a few precious rounds of ammunition for the shotgun he had managed to loot. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange, Elias opened the loading bay door. He took a deep breath, the scent of rain and decay filling his lungs. He was acutely aware of the silence. The unnatural, suffocating silence that meant only one thing: they were close. He moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a tree branch sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He avoided the main roads, opting for the back alleys and overgrown pathways. The fewer places he was seen, safer he had be. He had only been traveling for an hour when he saw it. A figure standing motionless in the middle of the alleyway, its back to him. It was tall and gaunt, its clothes torn and stained. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, as if it were listening to something only it could hear. It wasn't moving like a zomboid. It was eerily still. Elias froze, his heart pounding in his chest. This was one of them. He started to slowly back away, hoping to slip away unnoticed. Suddenly, the figure snapped its head around, its eyes locking onto Elias. They were cold, dead eyes, devoid of any humanity. A low growl emanated from its throat, a sound that sent shivers down Elias's spine. It moved with unnatural speed, closing the distance between them in a matter of seconds. Elias barely had time to react before it lunged at him, its claws outstretched. He dodged, narrowly avoiding its grasp, and swung his crowbar with all his might. The blow connected with its head, the sound of bone cracking echoing in the alleyway. The creature stumbled, but it didn't fall. It roared, its voice a guttural shriek, and charged again. He swung again, hitting it again and again, until it finally crumpled to the ground, its body twitching. Elias stood over it, panting, his hands shaking. He knew it wasn't over. There'd be more. He continued his journey, his senses on high alert. He encountered several more of the creatures, each encounter more terrifying than the last. He learned to rely on his instincts, to trust his gut feeling. He learned to move silently, to strike quickly, and to disappear before they could raise the alarm. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he reached West Point. The town was a ghost town, the streets littered with abandoned cars and debris. The air was thick with the stench of decay. It was obvious that death was here. He located the corner store the survivor had mentioned. It was barricaded, but the barricades were weak and dilapidated. He could hear moaning from inside. He cautiously approached the door, his crowbar raised. "Hello," he called out. "I'm here to help. Are you all right?" A weak voice responded. "Help me. Please." Elias pried open the door and stepped inside. The store was dark and cluttered, shelves overturned, merchandise scattered across the floor. In the back corner, huddled behind an overturned shelf, was a young man. He was pale and sweating, his eyes wide with terror. His left arm was wrapped in a blood-soaked bandage. "I'm Elias," he said, keeping his voice calm. "What's your name?" "Michael," the young man whispered. I'm infected." Elias felt a chill run down his spine. The infection. He knew what that meant. He tried to ignore the wave of nausea that washed over him. "Don't worry, Michael," he said. "I'm going to get you out of here." He helped Michael to his feet and supported him as they made their way out of the store. As they stepped outside, they were met with a horde of the creatures. They had been drawn by the noise. Elias drew his shotgun and fired, the blast ripping through the air. The creatures staggered back, but they kept coming. He fired again and again, until the shotgun was empty. "We have to go," he shouted. "Run." He grabbed Michael's hand and pulled him along as they sprinted down the street, the creatures hot on their heels. They dodged and weaved through the abandoned cars, Elias firing his pistol whenever he had a clear shot. They managed to lose the horde, but Elias knew it was only a matter of time before they caught up. They needed to find a safe place to hide, to regroup. He spotted an abandoned house, its windows boarded up. It looked like it had been fortified at some point. It was their best chance. They kicked down the boarded-up door and stumbled inside. The house was dark and dusty, but it was relatively secure. Elias quickly reinforced the door and boarded up the remaining windows. They were safe, for now. He helped Michael to a chair and examined his wound. It was infected, festering. Michael was running a high fever, his body trembling. Elias knew he had to do something. He couldn't just leave Michael to die. But what could he do? He had no medicine, no antibiotics. All he had was his wits and his determination. He sat there for a long, silent moment, trying to come up with a plan. He knew the infection was rare, but it was also deadly. He didn't know how long Michael had left. Suddenly, Michael started convulsing, his body writhing in pain. He started screaming, his voice a ragged wail. "Help me!" he cried. "Please, help me. I don't want to die." Elias watched in horror, as Michael's eyes rolled back in his head. He knew the hallucinations had started. The whispers, the visions, the imagined horrors that were part of the infection. It was a horrifying sight. Elias grabbed a rag and soaked it in water. He gently wiped Michael's face, trying to soothe him. "It's okay, Michael," he said softly. "I'm here. You're not alone." Michael's screams subsided into whimpers. He looked at Elias, his eyes filled with terror. I see them," he whispered. "They're coming for me." Elias held Michael's hand tightly. "They're not real, Michael," he said. "It's just the infection. It's not real. Michael closed his eyes, his body trembling. He fell silent, his breathing shallow and ragged. Elias stayed by his side, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort. Hours passed. The rain continued to batter the house, the wind howling outside. The silence inside was broken only by Michael's ragged breathing. As dawn approached, Michael stirred. He opened his eyes and looked at Elias, a faint glimmer of recognition in his gaze. Elias? He whispered. I'm here, Michael, Elias said. Thank you, Michael said. For staying with me. He closed his eyes again, and took a deep breath. A small smile touched his lips. It's peaceful now, he whispered. Then, he was gone. Elias sat there for a long time, holding Michael's hand. Finally, he stood up and gently closed Michael's eyes. He knew he had to leave. He couldn't stay in this house, not with Michael gone. It was too painful. He gathered his belongings and stepped out into the dawn. The rain had stopped, and the sky was a pale, watery blue. The world seemed strangely quiet, peaceful. He took a deep breath and started walking. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he couldn't stay here. He had to keep moving, keep surviving. He would never forget Michael. He would never forget the horrors he had witnessed. But he would also never give up hope. He would keep searching for other survivors, for a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. He knew the odds were stacked against him. He knew that he might not survive. But he would keep fighting, until his last breath. Because in this twisted, nightmarish version of Knox Country, survival was all that mattered. And he knew, deep down, that somewhere, somehow, there was still a chance for hope. Even in the face of the undead, even in the face of unimaginable horror. Elias the player, now Elias the survivor, would endure. He had to.